one of the more significant areas of the economy in this country is housing. And we can learn a lot about the health of the economy through housing. Oftentimes, new home sales are a leading indicator of forward economic outlook. And this is all really early, but we are starting to see housing slow down a little bit. And what I mean by slow down is, we're looking at, June 9th updates, inventories up 32.2% year over year nationwide, which is interesting. I mean, it's all very low levels. So this isn't we had a ton of inventory, now we have more. We had very little, right, but we're getting more. You're starting to see that pick back up. You're starting to see some pretty soft comments from home builders in their earnings reports. The Toll Brothers CEO came out and said very, very bluntly, spring was not good. Now, it doesn't mean it was bad, but it wasn't good.
Right.
And these things you start to kind of pay attention to. And if we start to build a trend in housing of data kind of consistently not meeting expectations, that's when you do start to question, okay, what's going on with the economy? Do we need to get a little more defensive? What are the actions to take?
Yeah, and I think it's very easy to rationalize why something like inflation hasn't changed meaningfully since some of the tariff conversation kicked off, because ultimately the actual implementation of those tariffs, at least as they've been discussed, hasn't really happened yet. So you can kind of cross out inflation as something that will give you an accurate read on the health of the economy post-tariffs. But when you think about, as Matt said, something like a leading indicator such as new home sales, the ripple effect that new home sales can have across the economy is pretty dramatic. I mean, you think of, just as an example, a company like Home Depot that is being used to help build those houses and stock those homes eventually. The fact that you have less people looking at buying new homes, that can tell you other information outside of, I'm just not ready to buy a house yet. So you can kind of read the tea leaves, and there are other examples of these leading indicators, I would say, that are worth paying attention to at this juncture, because quite frankly, some of your traditional indicators, like the ones in the labor market we get from the jobs report, or inflation, or even just retail spending, it's hard for me to have a lot of confidence in them right now, because it's almost like they're painting a picture with stale paint. It just is not incorporating the environment that could happen. So I'm not saying I'm completely disavowing or paying no attention to them. I just think that if you want a more accurate read, you have to start getting a little bit more creative and looking at some less traditional, less headline items.
Yeah, and home builder stocks are down, between 35 and 40% from their 52-week highs.
Right.
So they've priced in slower building conditions. Now, I want to fully say, we're not calling for a housing bubble. We're not calling for a housing bust, but it's a more economically sensitive area that you can watch and start to say, okay, is there a trend here? Are we going to enter some type of, slowdown,
right,
the dreaded R word?
Yeah. Well, and I think the reality of it is, again, you were very clear that this is a relative measure when we're talking about inventories increasing. Yes, it's off a low base, but they are increasing, and that's information. I mean, we looked at this data earlier this year where when you do get a pronounced detraction in new home sales, the forward returns are not very good, at least for the S&P 500, both cap-weighted and equal-weighted. We're nowhere near that level yet, but again, we want to start paying attention to some of these indicators, some of these items before we get to that point, because it's important to build an action plan well before it's actually time to act.
Right. And that's what's interesting. I'll read this excerpt from this report. The key stories for existing homes is that inventory is increasing sharply, and sales are essentially flat compared to last year. And the sales in 2024 were the lowest since 1995. That should translate to price being under pressure.
Right.